Welcome, I'm Sally Treanor, and this is the Watercolor series. We're still working on spring flowers, and today we're working on tulips. And we're going to be doing a little bit different this week. First of all, we're going to do 4 different paintings, maybe not all together today, but we're going to start with a piece of quarter sheet of paper that we're going to use tape to divide into quadrants. And we can use them vertically or horizontally. I'm going to do vertically because the flowers themselves present themselves vertically. And the first quadrant is going to be realistic color. And so you will choose a triad for that. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. But the other 3 quadrants, we're going to be using unrealistic color, and it's going to be colors that are directly opposite each other on the color wheel. And what is that called?
Complementary.
Complementary colors. And so in order to keep track of this on the tape, you are to write what colors you're going to be using to create those complements. So let's go ahead and start with tulips. Unfortunately, not the tulips that I picked this morning because those tulips decided to do something bold. And as soon as they got into the warmth of the studio and the light, they decided to bloom fully.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do those. I'm going to do those as representations of themselves. I'm going to use, this is my realistic palette, and it will be Permanent Rose. It's fairly easy to do tulips that are in their shape before they get fully blown. And I'm gonna do a green. This green is actually gonna go to cobalt, heavier on the cobalt. And Windsor yellow. It's quite a bright spring green. Tulips, I want you to bring the stems up to touch the red tulip, so the green bleeds up and the red bleeds down. I'm dropping some yellow into that stem that is wet green right now. I'm also gonna give myself a leaf, which is
Green.
comes right up as part of the stem. And then I'm gonna drop something on the paper. And so now I'm going to deepen my green a bit with more pigment, more of that cobalt. Incidentally, I use cobalt preferential to French ultramarine because I get a cleaner, more spring light blue from it. So I've dropped some blue into the stem, and I am liking the glow I'm getting from that. The stem exists below where the leaf comes in. And if I wanted to, I could just bring that all the way down. And I find it to be the most successful insertion of the leaves to the stems of a tulip to do them while it's wet. So I'm going to start at that wet stem portion and do another leaf, pressing a lot on the brush right now and bringing it up like that. And I'm wicking up all this stuff down here. I can come back into that. It's all wet right now. So let's do a little of that and drop in some more yellow. Maybe a little red. Because quite often with tulips, you'll get, different things happening with them while they're wet. including on the stem. Let's just got dry already because of the light in here. So you can see the leaves come out of the stem of the tulip. This is unlike the daffodils. The daffodils have no leaves on their stems. This is characteristic of tulips. So let's do some more of those. Little less value. So again, expressing this tulip shape. Let's give it, it's starting to get a little blown. So press hard, up to a point, and then bring out some petals. Next thing to do is, got to keep all these puddles wet. Blot your brush. Touch the wet flower so that the green bleeds up and the red bleeds down. Express a leaf. Express another leaf. You can drop color in, but right now my red has bled all the way down the stem, which is cool. I like that. Let's get some blue going on in there. Just drop it into that wet stem and let it bleed. Don't impose yourself on that. Just let it do its thing. And you can even cause it to run up and down. Let's do another flower. Actually, let's do this a little differently. Too dark. Remember to press down further or harder on your, not harder, more pressure on your brush at the beginning of the leaf and at the end of the leaf, raise it. And so the end of your leaf is nice and graceful tip. You've got a wet stem there, but there's this leaf interrupting that, so it's not bleeding down from the bud. But let's take our stylus and express some facts about the bud. That's a little bit of that seam between the incipient petals. And now let's add a little bit of red to that stem. And let's get one more guy in there. And this guy will make a little bit more blown. I'm not doing composition on this at all. I'm actually looking at one of these tulips that I've got in front of me, and it was a tightly closed tulip when I started this morning. Let's give ourselves a leaf. Actually, I'm gonna wick up. There's too much pigment there. And I would like some of that green to be part of the flower itself. So now let's give ourselves a leaf that is, it's going to be folding over on itself. I'm gonna have to take more of this red out of there. It was very, very frisky. Now we have to have, if there's red up there, it's gotta be, there's gotta be some red down here. And here, because, whoops, wrong brush. That's okay. We will make that, we'll make that leaf turn on itself later on. Again, we're picking up excess liquid. So I could do more on this, but I really just want to have something to work on, and I'll turn these into slightly more realistic iterations of themselves. Show the insertion of the leaves on the stems. We'll do more with that, but I wanted realistic color here. So I think I'll make the violet the color of the foliage, and I'll make the yellow the color of the flower. Let's get a nice big puddle of yellow, Windsor yellow, and do the same kind of thing. And I just did a bad thing. I came into that with too much pigment on my brush. But we're going to not let that bother us. Stem down a ways. Bend the stem down a little further. So I have a yellow flower, at least suggested yellow flower. And I'll give it a vein. But let's follow our same way of doing this. And we can come in with the components. So I'm going to have some, I can drop in some cobalt blue. And I can drop in some permanent rose. So it's not any longer strictly the two things separate. So let's do another flower. The flower is yellow. Start with the brush fully opposed to the paper, so it's a nice big shape. And wick up excess so it doesn't bleed excessively. And now I'm gonna come in with my blue violet. And touch the yellow flower. Insert the leaf. Insert another leaf. And so now I have more of a true complement going on here. Let's see what that does. Incidentally, this is probably the hardest one to do because purple and yellow, when they're worked together at the same time wet, give you mud, but I'm trying not to give myself too much mud. Let's get another flower. This one can be a bud. And those buds are usually the color of whatever the green stems are. This is not an exercise in composition, so don't worry about that. This is an exercise in anatomy and color. And again, we want an expression of that separation of possible petals of the flower. And let's give ourselves some of that yellow all the way down. This last quadrant is going to be, okay, the blue flower and the orange foliage. So I'm going to use the same brushes I had going before. I'm going to have a blot brush that has just plain water in it. I've got my stylus in case I need it. And then I have an orange brush and I have a blue brush. So it's taken just that long to everything dried out. So this is blue flower, orange foliage. All right. Blue flower. All right. Brush is vertical. Blot. Make the bottom part of the stroke wider. You can add a little bit. That's pretty wet. Stem. You do this flower by flower. Again, vertical. Go ahead and let gravity help you move that color around. So I want some of that glow of the orange up into the flower itself. Now this is where we've got that stroke. We're inserting the petal here. I mean the leaf here. I'm imposing a lot of the brush, thick stroke, crossing the stem. Here's where it inserted. And let's do the same down here. I went right over the tape, doesn't matter. Now let's go ahead and just cheat a little bit because this isn't going to go all the way down, and let's just let some color of that blue go into your orange and see how interesting that is. This bled down from there into there into there. This is bleeding up. So you have to do a flower at a time to make all of that happen. You can't do all the flowers and then come back in and expect that little magic piece to happen on a second go round. You have to do while it's all wet. Okay, let's do another blue flower. Odd tulips. I'm just keeping this puddle hydrated because it's so dry in here. Blot your brush. This one's a little further along. Use your brush as a creative instrument. That's a little bit light in value. Drop in a little more blue. Okay. Orange stem. Orange leaf. We want some of that blue to bleed down. And we want more blue to bleed down in this. Got to do it while it's wet. Stem isn't quite big enough. And of course, I'm running out of orange paint here. Easy to mix up. Not so easy to get at the right shade. Let me go over this so it's this. I'm opposing the brush really thick and I'm dragging it up and out. I'm gonna go ahead and just drop some of this color, blot your brush, drop some of this blue, see what happens. Let gravity move it around for me. Let it do beautiful things that I can't paint. Let's go back. Blue bud, little bud. Blot your brush, control the paint. Too much. Take my blotter brush and wick some of that up. Okay, now we have to come in with orange foliage. Introduce the stem to the flower. Same principle. And I can drop some blue into that. Got some nice bleed back up into the little bud. And you know, if you look at the buds, they're quite often a pale reference to the color that it's going to be finally. And also they're the color of the stem as well. Now, this is not nice. I don't like that very much at all. So I think I'll come back in with some orange. And that blue had made kind of a blotch there. I didn't like that. Now it's better. Okay, one final flower, bigger. Some petals going out to the edge. I'm getting some granulation now for whatever reason, just in this big juicy flower. I'm gonna blot up some of this, just a little bit too much pigment, too much water. Let's come back in with the stem. The stem will be commensurately bigger because it's a bigger, more mature plant. And it's very, very juicy there. Go ahead and just finish the stem to the bottom. So remember, these leaves are opposite and not next to each other. So let's do something with this right here. Gonna wick some of that up. Ooh, it's really nice. It goes up into the flower. Just connect this. Let's drop some blue in along the way. It's already drying out quite a bit. Okay, I want to show you just a couple of things. We're going to let that dry. That I would do if I was finishing any of these. So I'm using the same colors all the way through, so that's making what I have on my palette quite useful. Let's just take where this leaf is inserting into this stem, coming in with green. And now I'm going to use my blot brush to lose that edge. I have put that in front of the stem. Let's do the same thing down here. Again, always go back to fresh water. Now I have a blossom there that I don't like. Come back in with some water. I'm using non-staining paint so I can get rid of that. If I want or wet that broadly enough, I can just drop some green into that. I've just taken out the blossom. So what I'm doing here is kind of correcting errors, giving a little more reality to things. Let's separate this from this because it's behind. So I'm painting on the leaf that's behind, losing the edge below. Doing the same thing on this side. Unfortunately, I had just wet this to get rid of a blossom, but I can still go back and correct that. But let's just do the same thing with these leaves. We're not going to bother to do a whole lot of realism to this, but it's worth picking up on some of this stuff just to add a little piece of painterly stuff, nice stuff. Let's do this leaf that's turning over on itself, because I quite like that actually. Blot your brush. Look at the magic there. And I can even come into that baby, entirely permissible, with a little blue. And that's going to exaggerate that a bit. And the other thing that happens, and then let's do one other thing. This is fun. And I'm doing this not much value with the blue, coming in with my just plain water brush, letting the bottom of that bleed out, maybe the side. And just for good measure, let's drop a little red in that. And a little red in this. Just, you probably can't see that because the camera isn't picking it up, but you'll be able to see it when I post the photograph. I can keep doing this little pick for a long time, and it's fun for me. Let's just do a couple other things with this. Do a little negative painting. Kind of define where the petals are separating out. Now we're looking into the center, and let's drop just a little bit of blue in there to deepen it. And you'll see as this dries that it's going to be defining a few things. But let's exaggerate some of that. We'll drag with our stylus out of what we've just created. And we'll come back in with a little more red. Not much value. This petal is sticking out over there. This guy is sticking out over here. And again, you'll be able to see that better when I take a picture of it. This is kind of the fun part. But you can go back into all of these and do these little touches of realism if you want, just to kind of train your hand to see what should be there. Let me just do one more. It's worth doing this. Kind of exaggerates as that inserts. You'll see when I post this, that all of those little touches just change this into not just a little exercise, but something that's a little pushed further back. One other thing, this bled out before, so I don't want that to stay that way. I'm just going to reestablish that as a behind spot. And again, we'll lose this. Maybe let's do a little of that here. A little of that here. Okay, that's it.